Hello all, I am experimenting with studio mode in OBS today, so if it's a bit rough, I apologize. But first, song! It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! Jazz hands. Yeah. I always start in the wrong key in that. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on with me. Become a monthly patron. It helps support this content. Patreon.com, Leanna K. Oh, this is pretty cool. Okay. This is neat. The bulk of today is going to be spent answering a particular question based on the video I did about mass shootings, gun violence, and suicide based on Parkland, with understandable reasons. I want to thank you guys very, very much for being so great in your responses to things. There was a lot of debate in the comments, but it was all really respectful, and I saw a lot of people really trying to understand another point of view. So thank you for that. That is really helpful. That's what we try to do here. This channel is not just about me, it's about you guys as well, and you guys are the ones that make the comment section the envy of a lot of YouTubers. So thank you for that. I do want to touch a little bit on the Kingdom Come Deliverance controversy, just because apparently someone spoke to the developer, and the developer, Daniel Vavra, saw the video, liked the video, yay, disputed me on whether there were any Moors in Moravia. Look, the purpose of the approach I took to the video was, let's assume they're right, the people that were attacking him, for not putting Moors in Bohemia, rural Bohemia. My point was, even giving the other side intense benefit of the doubt, there is no evidence of Moors in Bohemia. The closest you can get is Moors in Moravia. The problem with having these debates online is it's not about reality. It's about what the internet tells you. The historians for Kingdom Come Deliverance could very well be right. The problem is, and I'm going to try to switch again here, there are certain websites that do say there were Moors in Moravia, and it's about what people perceive to be true, not what is true. So here's one website here that says, you can see it down here, it's probably pretty small on your screen, but Romanized Moor settled are Moravia, ancient name of the Czech Republic. Inaccurate, ancient name of one part of the Czech Republic. But Moors in Moravia, people can Google this and find it here. You cannot find similar data about Moors in Bohemia. And that's why I felt I could defend, even based on polluted internet information. That's what I was trying to do with this, not try to insist. And you kind of got to do that. You got to pick the best argument you can choose for a given thing. And for me, that was, all right, let's give them Moravia. But the game's not set in Moravia. It's set in Bohemia. Sorry, Outrage Warriors, you're still wrong. That's where I was going with that. So the people who are in touch with the developer, that's where I was going. I think we're mostly in agreement, and I'm really glad that, what's the studio? Warhorse? I'm really glad they like the video. It's nice when people like your work. I would love to do more direct stuff with developers. It's really hard because, you know, the Outrage Warrior contingent has determined me dirty, polluted, scarlet letter chick, literally the devil, and so a lot of Western devs won't talk to me. They like my stuff privately, but they won't go on the record talking to me. Crap, the sun's moving. Sorry about the flare. I'll try to stay out of it. And that's what I'm going to try to do for the rest of this thing about the stuff about gun violence, because it started off saying mainly on the right this time, which I guess it's because they're the party in power. When the left is in power, they tend to be, oh, video games, violence. Do you like that? Maybe this is a new character. I care a lot, but I don't want to have to do anything. So I'm not going to look at the thing that's right in front of me. I'm going to look at this thing over there that we all know we can't do anything about because it's protected by the First Amendment. So video games cause violence, okay? Sounds kind of like a South Park character, doesn't it? Yeah, some people, and I thought this is a really fair question, and it's complicated. People ask me, what evidence am I going by that suggests gun control does not work against mass shootings? I am in favor of gun control first and foremost because it will cut down on the number of gun-related suicides. With mass shootings, it's not sure it will work. I may have misspoke there, but the data is really, really messy regarding mass casualty events, overall rate of violence, mass shootings, and what causes them. And what I was talking about was the fact that most of the time, and I've seen this with the Parkland tragedy, that it's pivoted to an overall discussion about gun violence and mental health, not the specifics of school shootings. And let me tell you, the reason I said this is that school shootings is a niche of a niche. It's a subset of mass shootings. And let me show you the Google search. You'll see I have Googled school shootings per capita by country. And we get America's gun problem, how common school shootings are in America, the Wikipedia entry, list of countries by firearm-related death rate. That's not school shootings, and mass shootings. School shootings are a subset of mass shootings. When the most recent mass shooting in Canada happened at a mosque, and that wasn't a school. So that's not a school shooting, that's a mass shooting, which is why I said to cut down on school shootings specifically, we need more mentorship. We need more early intervention with young people, including young men. That's what I was talking about there. But you asked for data, so I want to show you some. Most people are familiar with this chart, which is the raw number of mass shootings in America versus all other countries. And you see way up here, United States, way down here, everybody else. This is per capita. And you see that the United States, this is gun ownership, but Yemen is way up there. And Afghanistan is not far behind. And Afghanistan doesn't have that many guns per 100 people. So when you start going per capita, we start getting a very different picture. I'll show you this, the deadliest mass shootings. So this is the number of people killed in a single event data. Here it is. You see the Norway attacks in 2011 are the deadliest, followed by Las Vegas, then South Korea, then Orlando, Istanbul, Tunisia, Port Arthur, Russia, what is it, Mikanskaya? Or is it Mikenskaya? I'm terrible with my Russian pronunciations. I used to go to school with a bunch of Russian people. They tried to make me better. I know muhi and yablaka, which apparently means fly and apple, or reverse. I'm not sure. So yeah, there's a lot of very deadly shootings in America, but there are also a lot of very deadly shootings around the world. And this is when we get into that question of probability. More people means more shootings. So America has how do I put this? There's a lot of guns in America, but there's also a lot of people in America. So depending on how you look at the data, you're going to get a very different picture of how violent the country actually is. And that's why I want to show you guys some other stuff. This is a chart of violent deaths by the Small Arms Survey, which is, I believe, done in Switzerland. But you'll see Brazil, Venezuela, Honduras, Guatemala. This is per capita, I believe. Yes, number of violent deaths per 100,000 people. Afghanistan, Iraq, you expect these places because there are wars. Libya, South Sudan, Somalia, South Africa, places like that. Brazil, is anyone surprised? Then you get into countries like Bolivia, Colombia, Central African Republic. But you see Russian Federation, the US, they are anomalies in what they call the developed world. Mexico is quite high. But you see Europe, small, and Canada, small. And then you get into Ukraine, Belarus, these places that are formerly Soviet countries, closer proximity to Russia. We all know what's going on in Ukraine right now. But, you know, there you see it sort of spill outward. Now let's switch over to the chart. There are also bar charts. If you're interested in going and looking, you see them by number. You see just how different it is. So I encourage you to look at both. Just because something, you know, comes up on a map in a certain way doesn't mean everything, because this stops at 30 and you'll notice that, you know, Syria is way above that. El Salvador is way above that. You really can't compare that to a place like Guatemala, even though it looks the same on the map. But let's shift over to violent deaths by firearm. Map changes. It's still sort of the same places, but you don't see nearly as much red. Everywhere but Venezuela, Honduras, El Salvador, because it's the same numbers, right? The red still means 30. So Syria, again, guns, but in those places with a lot of red before, Afghanistan, Iraq, they're not being killed by guns. It's other forms of violence. You go to female victims of lethal violence, the map changes again. So what does this tell us? It tells us that the bulk of lethal violence is committed against men, usually by men. And that's important to think about, because you notice in no place around the world does America look all that bad. I mean, it's bad compared to other so-called developed countries, but there are reasons for that as well. But it's what I'm trying to get through is that looking at things per capita and looking at things comparatively gives you a profoundly different picture of the issue, for lack of a better term. That sounds so hoity-toity, but it really gives you a different look on how this stuff kind of plays out. Now, I now have a map of guns per capita to show you guys. And this is the whole world, not just the white world. And I think that's important because the Eurocentric, but it's really American-centric take on this stuff annoys the crap out of me. Here's a map of gun ownership around the world, where the most guns are around the world. Guns per capita. You can't see it, but it's guns per capita. Look at Canada. I mean, the US, boom. But look at Canada. Look, you know that place that was like nothing? All these places that were nothing in the other chart about gun violence? Sweden, Finland, Germany. Look at all these guns. Look at all the guns. And, you know, not that many guns in the places that were screaming red. Not that many guns in many places in Africa. Not that many guns in Brazil or Venezuela. A lot of guns in America. Okay, where's Yemen? Oh, there it is down there. So 31.2 guns per 100 residents in France. More guns in France than Canada. Okay, that people are like, what? We have this weird, but more guns in Sweden than Canada. Finland's pretty high. Now, there's a good reason for this. The reason for this is there's compulsory military service in these countries. Now, let's look at this another way. Let's break it down. The you know, lists. People like lists. Let's look at the lists and compare stuff by stuff. Okay, the US has, this is what I said, the numbers are different. 88.8 guns for every 100 residents. The other one said 112 point something per 100 residents. Yemen is number 2. Switzerland is number 3. Finland is number 4. Serbia is number 5. Cyprus is number 6. Saudi Arabia, 7. Iraq, 8. Uruguay. Sweden and Norway, France and Canada, okay? This does not correlate. Despite what people say, these rankings do not correlate to the number of mass shootings per capita. Let's go back to this map. In terms of mass shootings, France is way up here, Canada's way down here. The United States has way more guns than Yemen. Yemen has way more mass shootings than the United States. And unfortunately, shame on the New York Times, it doesn't say what all these are. I wish it was interactive and we can bloop, 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 bloop. Oh, this comes from the Small Arms Survey as well as the University of Alabama. So the big problem with the Small Arms Survey website is it is really hard to navigate. But this is what I mean, that when we talk of correlation between amount of guns and number of mass shootings, the trend line's all over the map. We can't say with that there is clear correlation. We can't say, move forward, stupid sunbeam. We can't say that there's actually a strong correlation, because if it were so, you'd see a trend line that wasn't boop, 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 right? And yeah, okay, the US and Yemen are number 2 and everybody else is down lower, but we have to start asking this question. Why are there so many more guns in places like Finland, Switzerland, things like that, Sweden, Norway, and yet there's very few mass shootings, even though in Norway, the mass shooting was the most deadly ever. There are reasons for that, but I'm not going to get into them now because that's a deep dive into that particular issue. What I think is relevant when you're starting to talk about that is the Global Happiness Index. And again, it's super small, so I'm going to pull it up. But I don't know if you can read this because it's teeny, 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 tiny. Here we go. But if you look, who's the top of the happiness index? Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland, Finland, Netherlands, Canada. All these places with a lot of guns. New Zealand, Australia, Sweden. All these places with a lot of guns, but relatively few mass shootings based on... And this ties in better. I looked at other charts about GDP and income inequality and things like that. This actually lines up better with why places like Switzerland and Canada don't have more mass shootings based on the number of guns we have. So there's multiple factors going in. And while, again, I am in favor of stricter gun control, including handgun control, that includes background checks, that includes making guns harder to get, that includes more firearms training, licensing. One person suggested insisting on liability insurance, different policies for different guns to try to cut down the number of guns that people own just by the Chris Rock method, making it prohibitively expensive to own a ton of guns. But I am in favor of that. But for me, the big thing, and I said this and people jumped all over me for it, was because of the gun-related suicides that happen in the US. And I will not back down on this, and I want to show you the data that corroborates what I'm saying. This is small, again, I apologize, but this was the most palatable one. People pointed out that the suicide rate in various countries around the world, including Japan, got brought up a lot, but also Korea, but also places like Sweden, Hungary, Germany, France, Finland, those places with off the charts happiness indexes. I'm trying to Belgium. Canada's suicide rate is fairly high as well. And people pointed out, like, look at the non-firearm suicide rates. Yes, they are off the freaking charts. Japan has almost no suicides, but 0.00. That's almost no. That's no. But the non-suicide rate, firearm suicide rate, is off the charts. And this is all true. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of these countries with high suicide rates correlate to places where we have many, many months of the year with almost no daylight. That has an impact on you. And I'd be interested to see a breakdown state by state of the US on these non-firearm related suicide rates. Because don't forget, places like Alaska, are factored into. It doesn't say continental US, it just says the United States. So that's very possible. But look at the firearm suicide rate. Look, barely cracks 1 as you're going down the list. Canada is quite high in this regard. Now, that is in part because we have had an erosion in our gun control laws. We no longer track long guns nationally. You see, barely cracks 1. Norway is higher. Canada, which does correlate with more guns in the home. Finland, firearm suicide rate. This does correlate. More guns, more suicide by gun. Look at the US. 6.3. That is the rate. Compared to Canada, 1.7. And again, these are developed countries. So we see more of a correlation between more gun suicides. And these, again, are more likely to be men. And they are final. Somebody blows their head off, you can't intervene and pump their stomach. Now, Japan is there are cultural things about Japan that, go beyond guns or violence, or it's a question of honor and dignity, and certain things are more important than life. Now, this thinking does correlate to the mass shootings in the US. This was actually brought to my attention by a friend of mine who was actually a professional researcher years ago. He has a PhD in sociology. And yes, I'm friends with a sociologist. I know I rip on sociologists all the time, but it's a joke. It's because I just don't think the same way. But he's a researcher for a living. He's the one that told me to watch Pew Research. There's a reason it's called Pew. It stinks. But he pointed this theory initially out to me, that the only correlation that actually passes academic rigor with mass shootings, not specifically school shootings, because that's a subsection, but mass shootings in general, is the concept of aggrieved entitlement. And it is tied, like it or not, this will be unpopular by a lot of people, but it is tied to social concepts of masculinity. And there are researchers, here's one, you can see the research. It's fairly new, it has to be tested, but it's interesting. I'll read you the abstract. School shootings have become more common in the United States in recent years, yet as media portrayals of these rampages shock the public, the characterization of this violence obscures an important point. Many of these crimes culminate in suicide, and they are almost universally committed by males. We examine 3 recent American cases which involve suicide to elucidate how the culture of hegemonic masculinity in the U.S. creates a sense of aggrieved entitlement conducive to violence. This sense of entitlement simultaneously frames suicide as an appropriate instrumental behavior for these males to underscore their violent enactment of masculinity. What these researchers are suggesting is that American mass shootings are the American counterpart to the Japanese concept of seppuku. And that's interesting. I'm not saying I'm sure it's right. We need to see more data on this, but the person that put me in, connected to this, again, it's sociological. So this is the thing that drives me crazy. Instead of where's the massive amounts of data, sociologists like to pick case studies so it's easier to understand. And I go, that's not across the culture. And this is when I start going, sociology. But I went and looked, and it does extrapolate. It's just the way the data is presented. They like to go, here's 3, and here's 3, and here's 3. And I admit it's easier for the general public to understand this concept. Now, if you got triggered by the connection to masculinity because you think that means there's something inherently flawed in being male, that's not what they mean. And that's why I sort of jokingly stumbled on the $1 million words portion of it. What hegemonic means is ruling or dominant in a political or social context. So what it means to be a man, not the state of being a man, but the unique soup that is the expectations on American males. That's what it means. And a lot of people go, that's male bashing. You're saying there's something inherently wrong with being male. That's discriminatory. That's why I want to be very clear. That's not what it means. It means that the dominant culture somehow encourages this sort of behavior. And it's true that this is an issue in America that isn't an issue in the same way in other parts of the world. It is far more common for someone in Canada to own a long gun than a handgun. We do not have the proliferation of handguns. We have an issue in Toronto that they come up from Michigan, or as you Yanks like to say, Toronto. They come up from Michigan, and so they're not legal firearms. And even though handguns are illegal, we still have a gun problem because of our proximity to Michigan. Not just the US, but Michigan has a kind of unique militia culture. And it's a guns for drugs corridor. So it's a challenge. I can understand why Americans really aren't happy right now. They're very divided. They feel like their government isn't doing anything to solve any of the social problems facing them. This does tie in speculatively that why do America's government, why do Americans' gun statistics look so much more like non-developed countries? What is the correlation with non-developed countries? Someone I speak to on Twitter brought this front of mind to me this week: government corruption. He was telling me that, in his home country, there's so much corruption and they don't even think about it. And he was a guy I quoted when I said, as long as there's outrage, there's hope. I'd like to see correlations between government corruption or perception of government corruption and gun crime or mass shootings, because that map seems to imply that when you get more corruption, you get more violence. And when people can't trust their governments, they get scared and they start taking matters into their own hands because they don't trust the state to protect them. It's interesting to go and read about how places like Norway and Switzerland and Finland, the idea of guns is to, apparently the Czech Republic is like this. They have guns because they have a history of being invaded. And so they're just, if they come for us, we're going to defend ourselves. But I do think this is something to talk about. And I do think the data works a lot better than the conventional stuff. So thank you, commenters, for allowing me to elaborate on that data. To be clear, again, it is not that there is not a soft correlation. Yes, the number 2 and number 1 gun-owning countries in the world are also the number 1 and the number 2 mass shooter countries in the world. But the model falls apart after those top 2, so you cannot say it's across the board correlation. There is something more going on there. And if you watch anything like, say, the barbershop movies or anything produced by Black America right now, they're not saying just gun control, gun control, gun control. They're saying everybody needs to be responsible for our communities and the people in them. We got to take care of us. And that's the message that doesn't seem to be translating to this gun control debate. Is gun control is part of it. I'm not sure about mental health. I would love it if that was the answer, because that liberals love to talk about mental health right now because that gets more money from mental health services. That's the cynical deal they do in these gun debates. Mental health is talked about a lot because it's something conservatives and liberals can agree on. Progressives can agree on. Conservatives say, well, that means they leave our guns alone. Liberals say, yay, more money for health services. They can agree on mental health. The problem is that the minute people in their mental calculus about seeking mental health the minute they start thinking, if I do this, I'm going to lose this, and I'm going to lose this, and I'm going to lose this, it makes going into the system less attractive. If people are like, well, if I seek treatment, I'm never going to be able to own a gun. And guns are seen as a right in America, and so they get emasculated that much more. That's my concern about it. And I hate that I have to have this concern, and this is when people start telling me I'm sitting the fence or wishy-washy or all that stuff, but it's not that. It's, I want people to not have to think twice about going to talk to somebody if they need it. And I want people to engage with the system early enough that it isn't at the point where healthcare providers think they're a danger to themselves and others and they need to take away their right to own a firearm. I want people to engage before that. That's what I'm looking for here. And the only way you can do that is community mentorship, community programs, things kids can seek out because they find it fun, not because they feel like they're going crazy or that they're sick. And we never stop kids from ending up in that valley in the first place. That's what I'm saying. And I know this has been really long, but that's a lot to cover, and I think that's a good place to go. Hopefully I've explained myself well. I'm going to try to include all these links. Yike, this is going to be a nightmare of a description box. But thanks for watching. Again, thanks for your feedback. Thanks for having a respectful dialogue. Have a good weekend. This is the last one for a while. Probably a good place to stop. Wow, this is a heavy couple weeks. But I am diving in whole hog into Lady Bits episode 5. It'll be out first week of March, I believe, and February is a short week, so I lose 3 days in my process, which doesn't sound like a lot, but yikes, it really is. So thanks for watching. Have a great weekend, and hope you like the next episode of Lady Bits. Remember, patrons get advance views. Become a Patreon. We are, where's my thing? We are $200 closer to the goal of doubling Patreon support for a year. It's been going really well. We're just under a fifth of the way there, which is very exciting. And you get to see Lying on the Floor with Cats if you're a patron, which is exactly what I changed the name to Lying on the Floor with Cats and Loki, but it's always insane because I just set up a camera, lie on the floor, and the animals crawl all over my head. It's lunacy, but it's oddly compelling where I talk about stuff and give previews and stuff like that. So there is additional content you get if you become a patron. Still working out the premium content for people who pledge more than $5 a month. That's coming soon. But yeah, it's working on it. I'm happy that there's progress. So I know this is e-begging, but I got to do it. And it's at the end of the video, so you don't have to sit through it. Okay, thanks for watching.